East Tennessee TV is more than a network, it's a family built on faith. Your support helps keep faith centered programming on the air and reaching homes in every state and more than 185 countries all over the world. Simply scan the QR code on your screen to give. Thank you for sharing our heart and standing with us.
First off, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us on the Flobella podcast. I am super excited about our guest today with Jana. She is going to tell us about her story and then how she got into trauma recovery and her program that she runs. So I'm super excited to get into it with you and just hear more of your story and how, the things you went through to get you to the point that you're at. I think it's amazing. Just talking with you briefly. I'm like so excited.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor. And yeah, I have quite the story of what God's brought me through to get me to my calling. I probably could have gotten there a whole lot quicker had I listened and been a little more obedient. But we our journey is our journey, and we show up when we're ready. And it's no mistake. And I'm right where I am for a reason now, and I'm more than an overcomer, and I'm just excited to share.
I'm so excited to hear because I know when we talked on the phone briefly, you've told me some of it, and just
Mhm.
hearing the things you went through and so many things that I can relate with. And I feel like so many of us that go through traumas or different things and you just don't really know how to deal with it or recover from it. So to hear a woman of your stature going through that and the things you've been through, it's amazing. Like I love hearing about it, how strong you are now and what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I can just start off and share a little bit. You know, um, I'm in my mid 50s and I run a trauma recovery program, um, helping people heal from any kind of trauma that they have, from, PTSD to, military, trauma from being in the military, sex trafficking. I mean, anything that you can imagine, I work with clients on. And, it takes a special person to be able to do that. And what got me to this point was healing my own trauma and looking at myself and looking at what a wreck I had made of my own life. And, and yet I give myself grace because we can only operate from the toolbox that we're given at birth. And mine kind of started. My mother had cancer right after my twin brother and I were born. And so I think that kind of, even though she was there for me the best she could be, she lived, she was healed, God healed her, and she overcame it. But there was a lot of times when I was, a baby, she was gone, going through those cancer treatments. And I think it developed a lot of false abandonment wounds. And I have always kind of had that ingrained in me. And having said that, it's important to realize that all of our programming, the majority of our programming is set in stone between the ages of 0 to 7. And so by 7 years old, we've already kind of set in a foundation of what our program is going to look like, our belief systems. And granted, things like that will add throughout of our life, but I think that kind of set the stage for me. And then um, I grew up with an alcoholic father that was never present ever. And he did the best he could, but he had his own wounds and he just wasn't capable of getting what I needed. But I could say, from the time I was probably 14 on, it was me just begging for my father's love and not getting it in the way I needed it and being scared of, his behavior being an alcoholic. Um, I started seeking out that in other men that I couldn't get it from my father. So I was just looking for a man to validate me. And fast forward to now, I've been married and divorced 3 times. And I'm not proud to say that. And, I can say, my picker was broken and, look at what I missed. But what's wrong with me that I would pick those men? Because all three of the men that I was married to were very flawed, and I settled and I had zero self-worth in any of those marriages. Started owning my worth in the third marriage when I had healed and was becoming a trauma coach myself. But you know, those experiences and learning through those failed marriages are what have brought me here today. And so again, I just choose to say no failures, learning lessons. And I truly believe that God can use our pain and our mistakes to turn around and help others. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that I'm in my calling. And, you know, God doesn't always uh, choose the equipped, He calls the willing. And I remember a point when I was like 17 going to a church camp and God just telling me, you're going to do great things one day and I'm going to use you. And I remember kind of going, okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe we'll see, you know, and you know, not knowing what I don't know.
Right.
But I do remember that was a very pivotal point in my mind. And then 2 years after that, I married my first husband, and he was a drug addict and um, loved God, but a drug addict. And I played that song and dance for 10 years and just couldn't do it anymore because it was a safety issue for my children. And then I think in that marriage and moving into my second marriage, I learned a lot of toxic behaviors myself in order to survive, you know, and they weren't healthy. I own that. And I would say that second marriage was a marriage of failures on both of our parts and mistakes on both of our parts. And I learned so much in that, but I also lost myself really in that relationship. Um, Struggled to make ends meet, working 2 and 3 jobs for my kids. I was very distant, and then, you know, started drinking too much. Wouldn't say I was ever an alcoholic, but it was definitely a problem.
Mhm.
And I was always kind of in the back of my mind looking for a way out, but didn't feel like I had a way out. And you know, God was in my life, but minimally. And then I got really sick in 2017, intestinal disease and infection, and almost died. It was about a year and a half long battle and almost died. And I overcame that. And I remember just thinking, okay, God, I lived through that. I got over the hump. I'm ready to get serious. And I said, I want you to just shake me upside down and just refine me and make me who you want me to be spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I started working on my physical health, regaining that, and working out and just working on that. And, you know, be careful what you ask for
Mhm.
because sometimes God will use it in some very creative ways to bring us to where we need to be. And I already was miserable, and I think I was just subconsciously looking for a way out. And lo and behold, this narcissist entered my life, um, charmed me. I was still married. And you know, the term narcissist gets thrown around so much these days. And I don't like the label, and yet it's necessary.
Yeah.
Um, because for 6 years I suffered some pretty intense narcissistic abuse in that last marriage. And he sought me out. He saw this kind-hearted person that was, you know, excited and happy, and he charmed me, and he, you know, showered me with all the right things to say and do to bring me where he could get control over me. And it worked because I needed the attention that I wasn't getting in that second marriage. And I will never, ever, ever condone that. It was a horrible mistake. I listened to the enemy, and I got sucked in. And like I said, that was the hold that the enemy got on me to use. But we serve a great big God, and the end is that it didn't destroy me. And so I left that marriage for that man, thinking that this was a godsend. This was a way out of this horrible marriage that I didn't deserve and that it was toxic. And um, things moved really, really fast with him. You know, when you're dealing with narcissism, it starts with the love bombing and then gaining complete control of that relationship. And I remember thinking early on, I'm like, I want God in my life. And so even though I chose to be with that man, I also turned back to God at that point, and I was just clouded. My vision was distorted on
Mhm.
how sinful this was. But I did turn back to God in the midst of that. And I'm like, Lord, I want to serve you. I want to live for you. I repent from this mistake, but I'm now divorced and engaged to this new man. And so we started going to church together, but the control and the dominance continued. And then ultimately it started with demeaning and tearing me down
Mhm.
and belittling me. And I remember thinking, because by this point, I knew that I was still flawed. And part of that was him telling me how flawed I was.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I still needed to heal.
Mhm.
And so I found this trauma recovery program that was a combination of involving God to rewrite my story by rewiring the brain and getting into the subconscious to look at our deep wounds from our childhood and see how they affected our lives and how they created our programming and why we are the way we are today.
Mhm.
And I just was fascinated because I was able to finally see myself for the first time and learn about myself. I'm like, oh, this
Yeah.
is why I have no self-worth.
Yep.
This is why I have no self-respect. This is why I feel unlovable. And through that process, God just did such a number on me. And I don't know if I would have ever gone through that program had everything else not led up to that point, you know? And so I went through that program and I really found God in a new way that I'd never experienced before because I could get real with myself.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever felt like in time you're like, am I being real? And can God use me the way I am?
Yeah.
And I finished the trauma program and I was just mind blown. And I went to church that day and had heard a message. And I really don't even remember so much of the message other than what God spoke to me through the message. And it was, this is your calling to help others.
Mhm.
Use your trauma and the pain that you've gone through to show other women and men that they don't have to suffer, that healing is possible. And it starts by getting back in touch with those younger versions of ourselves, our inner children that needed things that they didn't get from their parents or life or whatever,
Mhm.
and allowing God to restore that and heal that through this process. And um, I was very leery because it is a meditative process. And I'm like, I want to be very careful what I open my mind up to because,
Yeah.
just like you can open your mind up for good, you can open up your mind for bad. And so I was very cautious and I really, really studied this before I signed up for it. And I can tell you that God is in the midst of this program. I've seen people come to Jesus through this program and he told me, he's like, this is your calling. And so I had asked my husband at the time, who had belittled me through the whole process, I don't think you're changing. I don't think you're healing. You know, this was a waste of money. And getting those checks in my heart, knowing that no, I'm going to listen to myself. And I just kept going. And about 6 weeks later, he came back to me and he said, yeah, I'm going to let you get certified so that you can help others heal. And so I did. And I've been doing the work ever since, and it has been nothing short of miraculous. Um, and having said that, um, about a year and a half into me being a trauma coach, things got really bad. He became distant. He he just changed. He just got checked out, and the whole nature of our relationship shifted. And if you understand narcissism, which I don't want to focus on too much on this, but if you understand it, they want all the attention, and when they don't get it, they will act out. And he also didn't like me. He didn't like healed Jana. He liked broken Jana
Mhm.
because he can control and manipulate that. And um, he didn't choose to be that way. Narcissists are born out of their own wounds and dysfunction from the upbringing that they're brought in. So I have mercy on that.
Mhm.
And we all have to be accountable for our mistakes. I have to be accountable for the choices I made, and so do narcissists. long story short, about a year and a half into me being a coach, he told me he cheated on me and served me with divorce paperwork. And I wasn't surprised. I knew something was off. I could feel him pulling away. And I mean, I thought I had Prince Charming. I thought I had the dream life. There were some days I was like, pinch me, my life is amazing, but also not being healed enough to realize the red flags
Mhm.
and actually seeing the monster that I was married to. And I was devastated after he left me. I didn't see how I could go on because he had manipulated me and groomed me to becoming so dependent on him. And so when that was ripped away, even though I very strongly had God in my life, I still, if I'm going to be real, I wanted to die.
Yeah.
And I did not see how I could overcome that. And I just thought, how in the world am I supposed to help other people heal from trauma when I can't even get out of bed myself from the trauma that he's now inflicted on me? And
Completely.
just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I said completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally.
And I was devastated for about 6 months. And I just thought, God, I want to die. I wanted to die. I was not suicidal, but
Uh-huh.
I definitely didn't want to live. And that was a place I've never been at before. It was kind of a scary place for me to be in, but I wanted to die. And, after crying and crying and crying and just, um, and I had a tribe of women in my group that I work with, the other trauma coaches, and they're like, Jana, we've got you. We've seen you. You are a strong woman. They empowered me. They're like, God's with you. You can do this. You can take a day off if you need to for yourself. And I don't, they definitely, I give so much credit to them because they pulled me through. But I remember laying in bed one day and just like, God, is this seriously the rest of my life? I'm so lonely. And how are you going to use me? How are you going to use this? How am I financially going to survive? Because I mean, I was literally building my own business, which was had barely off the ground. And I just thought, how am I going to do this? And he said, Jana, this is your calling. And he said, get up. And he's like, you've got three amazing kids that need you. And my mother had passed away when I was 20. And I've got kids that are 18 to 29. And he said, you know what it's like to live without a mother,
Mhm.
and as an adult, and you needed your mother. These kids need you. Get up. So I got up, and little by little, I just shifted my outlook on it. And I was like, okay, pain to purpose, and that's the name of my business is Beauty from Ashes Healing. And, and that scripture talks about how he'll take, our ashes and turn them to beauty. And that is really what he's done. Um, and I remember praying and praying and praying for my marriage to be restored because I just kept thinking, no, this is the enemy. He's trying to destroy us. I'm not going to be divorced again. I have healed enough to know right from wrong, and I know it's healthy. And again, God spoke to me and he's like, you don't get it.
Mhm.
I removed him. I removed him from your life. Don't worry about him anymore. I'll work on him. You work on you. I removed him from your life because he couldn't be in my life and me do what I do because he would be constantly pulling me down emotionally, and once I heard that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, okay. And he said, I will equip you. I will give you what you need to do this.
Mhm.
And he has. I mean, it's been just a very slow, two steps forward, one step back some days. And then, um, but I will tell you, it's been over 3 years now that he's been out of my life. And I'm so much better off. God is amazing what he's done in my life. And through these tools of the trauma program, because I've had my tribe that have helped me go through it and using the tools on myself. And also, there's really not a lot I haven't been through at this point, and so I can take that pain and be able to share it with others and be like, no, you can heal. If I can do it, here's what I went through. You can overcome as well. And so now I am growing my own business very heavily. I'm sharing my testimony with others so that they can know that no matter how messed up their life seems and that God can't use them because of their failures, that's not true. In fact, often it's quite the opposite. He wants to use our pain to help others. And now I'm writing a book and my business is growing and thriving. And I have never been more grateful or more excited about my life than I am this year.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I love it.
Thank
It's
you.
it's just so motivating. And I'm listening to your story and I'm like, there's so many parts to it that I can relate to in such a big way, and I'm listening to like how you grew up and with, your dad having alcoholism. My dad was addicted to drugs. And then, you're trying to find that like value in other people that I think a lot of women go through big time. So to hear your story and see how you go through it, like, it's so amazing to me. There's parts where I'm listening to you and it makes me want to cry because it just hits certain
Oh,
parts in my heart that like, I know the pain. I know what it feels like, and trauma is tricky. Like I just went through something pretty traumatic and it's like you think sometimes you have everything figured out and then all of a sudden this old, maybe it's something old from childhood. Maybe it's something like in your relationship all of a sudden that sparks it. And it's like, whoa, I didn't realize I still had a problem here or an issue here. And they kind of just start to rise or get untucked. And I'm just like, okay, God. But I think the hardest part for me and questions I have for you is like, my hardest thing is to let go and let God. I think from going through a lot of trauma when I was younger, I always felt the need for everything to be perfect all the time. That was my sense of being able to be in control. And I think my biggest thing is just trusting, like in those moments when you're like, oh no, like financially, what am I going to do without him? Emotionally, what am I going to do? And it's like to sit there and just trust that God's going to take care of it. And like, I think probably helped you a lot having the women around you too,
it,
to help lift.
yeah, it did. It did, and they're not local, so everything was over Zoom. But that definitely was so much better than nothing. And there were a lot of moments God had me sit in that pain, and we can't heal what we can't acknowledge.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we have to sit in it to feel it, even though it's grueling and I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
But sometimes God will have us sit in that pain because that's where we can heal by acknowledging it. Oh, this is grief.
Mm-hmm.
This is hurt. This is sadness. And acknowledging it. And again, with the tools that we have in the program, um, they teach us how to acknowledge that and heal them and grow.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for it. But you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about, when we grow up with these wounds from our childhood, um, of people pleasing, especially like if you've had a parent that was addicted, and they were checked out, all you want is their love. And
Yeah.
so you're like, maybe if I be just a little bit better, they'll give us attention, or maybe they'll get clean, or maybe if I, try a little bit harder and get better grades, or if I that vision of perfectionism and control. And it's such a falsity, because God tells us not to lean on our understanding, and yet subconsciously that's the only way we know how to operate. And all we're wanting is love from those wounds. And I think for me, last year, 2025, was letting go of that control and truly learning what surrender to God means. And had it been presented in my life in 2021, I wouldn't have been ready for it because I did have to control certain things just to survive. But we heal in the order that we're ready to heal in. And finally, last year, my business mentor had mentioned this book to read about control, and it was amazing. And so I found myself, what can I control? What can I control? And God's like, nope, it let me run the show and things will be good. And it took me, I'll say, it took me that whole year last year of me letting it go and letting it go and still going, okay, God, I'm still going to trust you, even though the finances aren't there or the opportunities aren't there. And I think finally by the end of the year, I had really gotten it in here. And um, January, I'm like, okay, God, let's roll. I'm not in charge, you are, and let's see what you got. And I'll tell you, these last 2 months have been nothing short of phenomenal
Oh,
about his unfolding and opportunities and just this book that I'm writing. And so I'm super excited. I really am.
oh, I'm so excited. You're going to be able to help so many different people. And to me, that's one of the biggest things I tell people that are going through stuff is like, don't just use the tools in your toolbox. Like, you have to reach out to people who've been through certain scenarios, like your
Mhm.
program and the therapy that you've gone through. Like, I'm excited to do it with you. I'm excited to, see other people to do it and heal from these things. Because I think a lot of times we think we can heal them ourselves in our own mind, and we get stuck in like this cycle, and we just keep going through it over and over with the same tools. And it's like until you make the uncomfortable step of reaching out of the box and asking somebody for help and going through therapy and going through these other things, you learn so many other tools that you can use to get out of it and have a better understanding of what you're going through. Because I think that's what it really is. Sometimes people go through things, or I know from personal experience, I'll go through stuff and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on right now. I don't even quite understand it. So it's nice having an outside voice to be able to explain to you, like, hey, this is probably from trauma from your childhood, or this is probably from something toxic. It could be like, something toxic you picked up from a relationship, or all those things come into a factor. So it almost feels like you're just slowly breaking yourself down into pieces, like, okay, what's next to work on? Okay, I got that. So then what's next, and take it.
Absolutely. And, healing is a journey. We never just arrive, oh, we're all healed. It's not
Yeah.
like that, and we heal in layers. I mean, I had healed those abandonment wounds from my past, but when my ex-husband left me, another layer came up to heal of abandonment. And so, I mean, I've had to work abandonment 3 or 4 times, and we peel apart those layers as they come up in our life and they're ready to heal. And you know, you hit the nail on the head about the patterns because we do. We just what we don't heal, we will continue to repeat until we really acknowledge it and deal with it. And you kind of brush it under the rug. Oh, we're good. Like you say, just wishing it away. It
Yes.
doesn't work. And often, why I find this program is so effective. 96% of every single thing that we do, we operate from the subconscious, and only 4% from the conscious mind. And
Mhm.
so with this program, by getting into the subconscious, you can heal it at the root so it's permanent. And, if you have an unlimiting belief, let's say of, I'm not good enough, when you get in and you find out where that originated from,
Mhm.
in your childhood, then we have a process to heal that and it's permanent. And God is often a part of that too. I don't know if the audience is familiar with a process called sozo, but I've also incorporated that process. And it's like, well, what does God and the Holy Spirit or Jesus have to say about that? And let's really dive in and what did they so what is the truth about me from God's perspective? Because our perspective from our subconscious is going to be distorted.
Oh, completely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And um, I continue to be mind blown by the tools and what God's doing with it. It's just amazing. And that there is not a person out there that can't be helped from this. That is, if you're out there and you're losing hope today, and you're like, yeah, I'm a believer, but nothing's changing in my life, and you're just hopeless. I'm here to tell you that there's nothing that God can't heal you from, that can't overcome, and to not give up. And that there is always hope. Our pain is real, it's valid, and we don't just sweep that under the rug, but there's always hope for transformation.
I love that, Gianna. I'm so thankful I got to talk to you today and do
Yes,
you. I
thank you.
just feel like it's going to help so many people that listen to it. And I'm just super thankful for you.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to share. It's great to be able to chat with you today, and thank you for having me.